Good afternoon. It's my honor and privilege to be here at the inaugural edition of the Businessworld Web3 Forum. We couldn't have had a better person than Mr. Bansal to talk about what is happening in this domain. Mr. Bansal is the CEO of the RBI's Innovation Initiative. So he will tell us about RBI. We don't hear about RBI very often these days. We hear it in the context of rate cuts or rate hikes, or the annual report that the RBI comes out. Much lesser is known about what Mr. Bansal does, so I'm grateful to him for making time and being here. Let me start by asking you, Mr. Bansal, give us a sense of the role that you and your initiative plays in helping the technology and the financial landscape, and then we'll come to Web3.
Thank you so much. Very good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Dr. Batra, for having me here. So, who are we? Reserve Bank Innovation Hub. I luckily bumped into a few people whom I have met. So, we are a 2-year-old company set up with the specific focus on fostering and evangelizing innovation in the financial sector. That's what when Governor announced setting us up. We are a 100% owned company by RBI. So as I say, we are a lineage of RBI, but the agility of a startup. That's who we are. We're based out of Bangalore, just to be clear. We're not based out of Mumbai, we're based out of Bangalore, the fintech capital of the country. And our mission is frictionless finance for 1 billion Indians. And as we go along, we'll talk more about it. And what does that mean? It means, and that is very dear to me personally and to my company, that we have to solve friction in financial services. We have to chip away at it one after the other, depending on various customer segments. We focus on 3 major, pillars of innovation. First is process innovation. I'm sure if I do a raise of hands, how many of you are very happy with your bank? I'm sure there are banking friends here, but please bear with me. How many of you are really happy? In my experience, you are happy? That's
3
good
people in the audience are happy with their bank.
So,
how many of you are happy with your spouse? Okay.
Yeah.
I said your own spouse. That's the question, but coming back to innovation and RBI.
Yeah. So process innovation, whether it's onboarding, re-KYC, e-KYC, your banking app, your browser, anything that you want. Do you get the experience that you want? And I'll specifically talk about a project which we showcased at G20, and the governor was very appreciative. I'll talk about that in a bit. Second pillar is product innovation. Financial services, and I see a lot of product companies here, somehow we focus on what we have to give on the supply side rather than focusing on what the customer wants. Hence the topic of today's discussion, customer at the center of innovation. Product design in financial services should be the way the customer wants rather than what I as a bank or FSP offer. And that is changing obviously in this decade. Third, which is an enabler, is policy innovation. I'm sure as Dr. Batra said, RBI is a regulator but also an enabler in a lot of ways. So how does it enable responsible innovation? That is the third pillar of our work. I'll talk more about it, Dr. Batra, later.
So, Mr. Bansal, let me ask you, as you rightly said, Bangalore is the fintech capital of the country. And I keep saying we have 3 valleys in the world. There is the Silicon Valley, which is about innovation, impact, and scale. Then there is the Valley of Surveillance, which is in China. They do surveillance on everybody else. And then there is Valley of Good, which is in India. UPI is a great example of that. ONDC, early days, but great example of it. As we speak, Mr. Koshi is speaking at an Exchange for Media D2C forum, not far from here, from where I'm coming. And now is the RBI Innovation Hub to be able to, as the ecosystem moves to a certain way of doing business, as consumers get ready for a digital life fully. My 84-year-old father still likes going to the bank once a week, not too far from his home. But tell us, what is the RBI Innovation Hub doing? What are the moments of truth you created for, you talked about process innovation, you talked about product innovation. Give us some examples of the work that you've done which has led to these for the consumer. Some moments of truth.
Sure, happy to talk about it. So, when I took charge, as I said, we are a startup, then we set up our office. Then I asked myself, okay, what do we do in innovation? Because we are a very different company. We're not a product company, we're not a services company. So my board always said, how do we tell the people what do we do? So we got on our mission and started looking at the customer, getting into the shoes of the customer. So one of the big customer segments was 120 million farmers. I'm sure a lot in the room may not relate to it, but I'll tell you the story of a farmer. If you are a farmer in Gorakhpur or in Madurai, you want a loan under the Kisan credit card. 1998 से वो scheme चल रहा है. 25 years. RBI, Government of India is pushing it. What does it take for you to get that loan? I'll tell you the story. My team went to the field and discovered. Just 4 to 6 visits to the bank branch, that's it. That's it, 4 to 6 visits. How many weeks? About 5 weeks on an average. And about 5% out-of-pocket expense. And I'm not talking about any corruption or something. I'm talking about 1,000 rupees to the lawyer who will go to the land record registry and check whether the land belongs to the farmer. I'm just talking about a 1 lakh rupee loan. Then 1,000 rupees to the village officer, 1,000 rupees to the engineer. And in one district, what was shocking, 5,000 rupees to a document writer. My young team did a debrief call. I'm like, 5,000 rupees to a document writer? So that district was on the border of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So most of the farmers were in Tamil Nadu. They had to apply in Kannada. They had a 5,000 rupees to a document writer. And then we said, look, I've been part of founding team of Aadhaar, having built various tools and pieces. So we asked a lot of banks and a lot of consulting companies, can you give us the full customer journey? What does it take for a farmer to get a loan? Unfortunately, all of them gave us 3 to 4 boxes, just boxes. वो apply करता है, we assess करते हैं, disburse करते हैं. We're like, that's not a customer journey, boss. Tell us the full customer journey. Finally, my young team went to the field and did the full customer journey. We looked at all the steps and we gave ourselves a challenge that this farmer should now get a loan through a STP, straight through process. So we have leveraged most of the DPIs that India has built. All the 10 processes are today digitized, automated. You might have, some of you happen to see media in the last 2 days, CNBC to other, news, this thing they've carried my interview. There are newspaper reports which talk about how we have ensured that it is end-to-end digital. And that is where I would say when the first time, I went to the field myself. I know a bit of Tamil, so it was in Tamil Nadu where we started with the Federal Bank. The moment of truth for me was when the farmer said, sir, money, they started saying, sir, it take 2 months. So they thought maybe we are doing something as, a lot of public authorities do. So in a few minutes, I asked him, please look at your phone. He's like, acha, my application is over. We said, no, look at your phone. And he was shocked that the money was in his account. And honestly, the banks who worked with us, we had to really nudge them. Their delight to serve the customer in this way was unbelievable. So when a G20, SDFC Bank has done that with us for cattle loan, along with Federal Bank, that we have leveraged the dairy ERP data of Amul to give a seamless customer journey, something which used to take 26 days, now takes less than 10 minutes. So this is what I would say customer delight, because our focus again, customer, which unfortunately, I know a lot of non-financial people are there. I, as a consumer of so many of the goods and services, I wonder why they don't look at the consumer. And I think, unfortunately, in India, we have to do more and more of design thinking and getting into the shoes of the customer. I'll give you an example. I was with the board of a large private bank, and the MD asked me then, Mr. Bansal, any suggestions? I said, only one suggestion. stand outside your bank and look at what is the customer journey. And I wish and I hope that most of the people in this room do that. Then whether you are a startup or a product company, the company will remain forever because the customer delight and the moment of truth will be known.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal, for giving those two specific examples, one of farmer loans in Tamil Nadu and second of how the cattle loans have been re-engineered using the ERP database of Amul. Now let me ask, of course you said you're looking at the process, product, you're looking at the pain points by being in the field. How do you anticipate needs of consumers when they've not experienced that? How do you figure out what is needed? You've given us two examples. Give us some more examples. Because the customer sometimes doesn't know what needs to be done because he or she has never experienced that. So there is a latent need, not articulated. Give us examples on how you've been able to cater to unarticulated needs and create new products and services.
Thanks. One is an example from non-financial services. All of us know that. Did we expect that I come from the Walkman era when the Walkman started, Sony? So obviously we are like, oh wow, this is cool. And then came the iPod. We are like, oh, you can carry music on the small device. So companies have figured out that there is a latent demand. Instead of the CDs and cassettes of my era, you can listen to music on demand the way you want. So in financial services, I give you another very small example. Senior citizens in the country have to file a 15G, 15H, so that TDS does not get deducted. Very small problem, which a lot of a young crowd here may not appreciate. They have to go mostly to their home branch and submit that form so that TDS on the FDs is not deducted. Simple problem. Unfortunately or fortunately for our banking friends and partners, during COVID times, my father-in-law was staying with me and he has FDs in 5 banks, although I keep asking, why do you have FDs in 5 banks? Just please make it in one. And he is struggling to file his 15G, 15H. So when I took charge, a lot of the work that we do comes from my personal life and we realize the problem. We said, what is the big deal about filing a 15G, 15H? Why do I have to go to the branch? So now today with the help of 5 banks, you can file your 15G, 15H over WhatsApp, over SMS, and you need not have an app or an internet banking account to do that. One of the interesting pushbacks from banks, boss, you can always do it. I asked them, what percentage of senior citizens use a banking app? They're like, oh, that's the problem. So thanks to the cooperation with some of the banks, now you can file it without any friction. And I have my colleague Shalini, her father was supposed to go back to Jharkhand to file it. When she told, Dad, you don't need to go. He was like, are you joking? And he was banking in Canara Bank and he sent a text, everything was sorted. So this is how we try and approach things. I can keep on giving more and more examples.
Yeah. One more question. We are at a blockchain Web3 conference. How is blockchain impacting and enabling the work that you are doing at the RBI Innovation Hub?
Thanks for bringing it up. One of the key areas is how do we leverage emerging tech for ensuring a frictionless financial system. And my personal belief that blockchain or distributed ledger works best in a low trust environment. So we identified a use case last year, that is inland letter of credit. We ran a POC with 11 largest banks in the country. And our focus was that it should not be tied to one single technology fabric. In India, we have always believed in interoperability. We got 3 fabric providers in the room, 11 banks in the room. We ran a POC with them. And now we are working with IBBIC. It's a company owned by 18 banks that is gaining traction now to see how do we leverage blockchain for things which banks need to solve together. So there are multiple use cases included, potentially syndicated lending. So we are working with the banks to see what are the use cases. So we are pretty bullish that there are real problems which banks have and which can potentially be solved by Web3.
Also, you and me come from an era of physical banking, going to the branch, having the ATM, uh, and we are living in the UPI era, in the ONDC era, in the Web3 era. Uh, it is said that the future of banks is neobanks. The future of bank is a totally automated digital bank, whichever way. Give us a sense of what are the trends you can see, which may be small right now, but you see them becoming mainstream and big and changing the way banking and financial transactions happen for consumers.
One of the first things, like I started that survey, would you not want hyper personalization of your banking app? Unfortunately, my bank shows me the same app for last 10 years. And why is the app, even if Mr. Dr. Batra is banking the same app, a bank, why should it show him the same menu options instead of showing, the menu options he uses versus me? Hyper personalization is what Gen Z needs. 120 million Gen Z. And as you said, our banking friends have to realize that unless they do hyper personalization, this is one of the important things that they need to do, because I'm sure all of you understand what it means. A banking app of the same bank for you, me, or you has to be different. We've been convening a lot of chief digital officers of banks to discuss why are we not reinventing customer experience. That's one. The second, we are working with the banks, and I see that that's a major potential, that unless we move to local language banking, because if they're digital natives, does not necessarily mean they're English natives, right? Language, English language. So let language not be the barrier, and I can talk to my banking app in Tamil, Telugu, Odia, or whatever, and do my banking transaction. So you're working with IIT Madras and IDRBT to make that happen. So we are pretty bullish that not necessarily the end of banks, but the banks are reinventing themselves to serve the consumer in a lot of ways.
Of course, RBI ambit is the banks, but it is overall the economy, right? Banks is equal to economy in some way. Give us a sense of innovation that we are not able to see now, but is on the cards. Maybe something that you talked about how you helped in the cattle, financing. You talked about the fact that how did you help in terms of financing farmers to enable their agriculture businesses. Give us a sense of some other use cases that you have experimented with, you have done tests, which you will roll out in the next few weeks, months. For example, maybe one, not too much. You can give us something that is not in the public space.
Yeah, when he was asking, I was trying to think which one is safe to talk about, because we'll be talking about in public. But let's talk about, let's say, UPI native population. We believe that if we have to deepen and widen finance in the country, trust is one of the most important pillars. Because if your UPI transaction has gone wrong once, and it is not reversed, you're going to tell 10 people, chhod do, ye UPI nahi chalta. Right? So RBI has taken the initiative, there is online dispute resolution. But we are now speaking to 5 banks, actually even today my team is in Mumbai, to see how we use AI/ML and set up an AI center for finance. In the next few months, we should be launching it soon, where banks come together, identify use cases which need to, let's say frauds itself in UPI as potential use case, as the first use case we are looking at. So that is in the works, and this is perhaps the first time I'm talking about it.
So an artificial intelligence center for financial transactions, for UPI, for enabling the banks to enable the customers that use UPI. Fantastic. I think the power of artificial intelligence is manifesting in media, in content, in banking, and you'll see it in every healthcare, in every sector. You talked about trust. Uh, One of my friends, he's not in the room now, you know who I'm referring to. Since the morning, we've not talked about, and I'm not going to talk to you about areas that I shouldn't be talking to you, but crypto. We don't talk about crypto, because it is not legit. Let me be direct. It is not legit in the country. However, what are the things that can be done by the player? There's a new player called Sui, which is trying to build a kind of alternative to Ethereum, raised $300 million. There are my friends in Fire trying to do something else, raising money. And I can go on about smaller companies. We can't wish away, so to say, crypto. What do you think the crypto industry needs to do, right, to be able to gain more trust? For example, we know what has happened with SVB, we know many other, examples which are really doing disservice to the domain, right? What do you see the play out in India happening? I know you're not the RBI governor, I know you're not the finance minister, clearly I know that, but still, what's your personal view?
Unfortunately, Dr. Batra, I'm in a public position, so I cannot give my personal view but I'm happy to talk to any of you. There are ideas which I keep giving the crypto people on what you should do better, but that's the only thing I can say, unfortunately.
Okay, we'll go back to innovation again. Now, when you are building process innovation, product innovation, you must have got, a lot comes from observation. The second comes from looking at pain problems, and the third comes from looking at what works in a different sector. I think these are broadly the three things you would use. Give us an example of something you saw in another sector and said, why can't we do this in the financial services domain?
Yeah, my favorite example, although my comms team said I will not name the company, I'll be careful. Music. That's my favorite example. In music, you play what you want, when you want, where you want, how you want. Period. So I also wrote an op-ed about it. We in financial services need to get to understand this is what the consumer of today needs. So we are actually learning from the music industry the way it is transformed from where it was and how the consumers are adopting, the way I want. So in financial services, we see a lot of scope for a product which I will move the meter and say, do I want a daily repayment or a weekly repayment or a monthly repayment or a flexible repayment? I was talking to somebody, why do I have to necessarily give a 10,000 rupee EMI on the first of the month? For all you know, on the first of the month, I may not have enough money in my account. So I should be able to pay 2,000, 5,000, 3,000 whenever I want. That's how it should be. Other example of the financial playlist as I call it, is when I wake up on a Sunday morning, a rainy morning, I wake up on a Sunday morning, it's raining, it tells you this is what, hey Rajesh, you want to listen to this music. So a lot of people have told me music is different from finance. But I'm sure my app knows what do I do on the first of every month. I'm sure your app knows that. But is it ever offered that instead of doing 4 transactions, when I log in, it'll say, hey Rajesh, welcome to the first of the month. This is what you want to do. And bingo, you can do it. I see my good friend Nitin sitting here. I'm sure they are all reinventing customer journeys. And this is what we are learning from other industries, such as music industry. And I think we need to adopt that, and working with a lot of financial sector players. Another example is investment. I am used to share trading in the physical form. Then DMAT happened. But then the new firms have changed everything. They have ensured that investment is not limited to experts in the field, but it's on the go. My 25-year-olds in office, they use Grow, Zerodha, whatever, like a breeze.
Absolutely. Even in the media and content play, micro payments for micro content or granular content or an article in a simple way is the way forward. People may not read the whole issue, they may read an article, and there are companies in the Asian ecosystem which are enabling micro payments of micro content, so to say. So I think, though I'm very shy to talk about shampoo and sensitization for obvious reasons, but I think it's happening in every domain.
But that's a great example you gave from media, right? Why do I need to buy a full magazine? If I want to buy an article.
You should always buy the full magazine, as you do. Right. And on the site, you should read articles, additional articles by paying. But we get there. Last point, to keep to, we've been running on time and our panelists for the next session are here. If you had to outline 3 trends for the future that are relevant for this forum in terms of innovation in the Web3, blockchain, and financial technology space, something which is an amalgamation of financial technology, blockchain, and Web3. What are those 1, 2, 3 trends that you gave beautiful examples? I think every panelist can learn from the fact that you gave very really live examples of use cases. So give us some philosophical view now on where are we headed.
That's a tough one, especially because you brought 2 other elements. I'm happy to talk about innovation in finance all the time. But maybe let me give you my personal view that I'm sure a lot of audience would not love it. The fact is, we talk about distributed ledger, but it has to address a problem that exists. I've asked a lot of people, tell me one good reason why you want this particular, in finance or non-finance, to move to distributed ledger. I'm sure I'm sounding very dated here, because there are multiple advantages. But then when I dig deeper, honestly, my experience is most of the time, I don't get the answers right. A lot of experts dodge the right answers. So I'm just saying there is potential obviously in the technology. We have to look at what is the pain point it solves for the consumer and the financial service industry. And that is what we should focus on to be able to leverage new emerging technologies.
Thank you, Mr. Bansal. I'll take that in a different way. I'd say, like in the technology space, you had a Google, you have a Google, you have other companies. We didn't build that from India. Hopefully, an Indian company will lead in the Web3 and the blockchain space. This Web3 space in some way is an equalizer where Indian companies, because of the confidence of Indian entrepreneurs and their proven track record in the last 2 decades of building large companies with limited capital, I think the blockchain and Web3 ecosystem is an ecosystem where you'll see Indian companies making a global impact and building global companies. That's what I see happening. Thank you for your inputs and your very specific examples on how innovation in the financial services space is happening. Thank you for being here. Please give Mr. Bansal a big round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Batra, for having me.